with us. He's international security expert, senior research associate at MIT Security Studies program in Boston. Jim, good to see you. No test so far. Do you think that's because the president dispatched the aircraft carrier battle group for the Carl Vinson to lurk off the coast, as a looming reminder to Kim Jong-un that the U.S. is there and watching?
I think it's a possibility, Eric, but I think it's more likely that if the North Koreans stopped because of pressure, it was the pressure from China, because there was a government-controlled newspaper that floated the idea that if there were a test, that China would cut off oil supplies, and that really goes to the heart of the North Korean economy and its ability to function. They had already said that they were going to postpone flights from China to North Korea, and so I think that's probably it. And if that's true, then that's a win, I think, for President Trump, insofar as it would seem to suggest that good things were coming out of that summit.
How serious do you think China really is? I mean, look, 90% of the trade with North Korea, they said they cut off some of the coal that they rely on. I mean, how far do you think Xi Jinping really will go to say, stop, don't have another test, or de-escalate? I mean, I don't see Kim Jong-un de-escalating his nuclear program yet.
No, and you're right about that. What we saw this weekend was restraint. We saw neither a nuclear test, which they're ready to conduct on a minute's notice, or a missile test. And I consider that a win. When I woke up this morning after a full 8 hours sleep, because I didn't get up in the wee hours answering phone calls about the test, I was happy about that. We all should be happy about that. So I think that's a win. How far is China willing to go? Well, I think the U.S. has common interests, but not identical interests. China doesn't want North Korea causing it problems with its nuclear weapons. It causes it all sorts of headaches. But China doesn't want a failed nuclear weapon state on its borders. So China will help try to denuclearize, but they're not going to squeeze North Korea to the point of collapse. But there is this overlapping space in the middle where I think the U.S. and China can work together.
Well, it seems that we have after that trip and the visit from the Chinese president. But you also talk about the fact that they could do it on a minute's notice. Do you still expect a test? Could we get one? And if so, when?
Well, the pace of both nuclear and missile testing in North Korea has increased dramatically when the young Kim took power. They had 2 nuclear tests last year. You got to think that, all things being equal, they're going to have another one at some point.
And if they do one, what does America do? I mean, do we have a missile strike, and then that could unleash who knows what on South Korea, on Seoul, on downtown Seoul, and on the 28,000 U.S. troops who are stationed in South Korea?
Well, you've put your finger on it, and that's exactly why when the Trump administration conducted its policy review for North Korea, one of the few that they've been able to complete so far, they sort of did not embrace the military option, because you start something and it could end really badly. And it's not just the nuclear weapons. You don't know if you get them all, if you hit them. And then what, do you want an angry country with a nuclear weapon still in its hands after you've attacked them? Probably not. And then they've got all these artillery shells, as you point out, aimed at Seoul. And as they reminded us quite dramatically, they have chemical and biological weapons. They use that VX nerve agent to kill Kim's half-brother. So military options, not great. And so I think the president will pursue the policy he announced, which is increased pressure, which is sanctions, and maybe some engagement. But Sean, I'm an optimistic person Eric, I'm an optimistic person by nature. I'm hoping maybe this is an inflection point, that there's some space now, an opportunity to perhaps, with China talking to North Korea, to start to put this on a different track. But it's going to require some conversations among all the parties, and it's going to require that South Korea have a president, in place that we can work with.
Well, you talk about engagement. I mean, look, President George W. Bush, he took them off the terrorist list. He said that the Chinese president at the time, when he met with him, he told him that North Korea was our problem. And here I want to read you what President Bill Clinton wrote in his book, My Life, about this. He said, after 16 months of intense negotiations, we had reached an agreement with North Korea to end the threat of nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula. The agreed framework committed North Korea to freeze all activity at existing nuclear reactors, allow them to be monitored, ship 8,000 unloaded fuel rods out of the country, dismantle its existing nuclear facilities, and ultimately account for the spent fuel it had produced. They did destroy one facility, but, man, they lied. They totally broke that oil food agreement during the Clinton administration. Why would we expect anything else differently now? Is it because China is acting differently?
I would say two things. One, 2017 is a lot different than the mid-1990s. China back then really, didn't take North Korea seriously, thought it was a little brother, didn't really respect it very much. Now, I think they see that North Korea is a problem, and it strengthens the nuclear hawks in South Korea and Japan. We're putting THAAD in South Korea. They don't like that. The Chinese don't like that. We're doing that because of North Korea. It's, we have all these naval exercises. China doesn't like that either. I think the Chinese position has definitely evolved over these last 15 years, and I think, frankly, Eric, if we could get a freeze, on both the missile and the nuclear program, I would welcome that, because every day, and we saw it in the parade today, every day they are advancing their nuclear and missile capabilities. So as an initial step, if we can freeze that so it doesn't get any worse and buy us a little time, I think that would be a good outcome.
Well, maybe with the Chinese pressure, as you say, we are now finally at a turning point. Jim Walsh of MIT, always good to see you. Thank you for your insight today.
Good to see you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, too, of course.